Before the great kings of Ur and the mighty rulers of Babylon, there was Lugalbanda, a man caught between myth and history. His name would one day echo through Sumerian legends. But his story began with something much more human, a long, grueling march to war. The city of Uruk, powerful and proud, had a king named Enmerkar. He wanted to conquer Aratta, a distant land across the mountains, filled with riches, strange gods, and sacred treasures. Enmerkar wasn't content with peace. He wanted submission. And so, he gathered his army, spearmen, chariot drivers, priests, and servants, and among them marched Lugalbanda. He wasn't a hero yet, just a loyal man, a soldier, someone who followed orders and hoped to survive the road ahead. The army moved slowly, crossing hot plains, dry valleys, and jagged hills that tore at their sandals. Days turned into weeks. Their food ran low. Tempers flared. Men whispered about the gods watching them, waiting to punish the arrogant king. And then, Lugalbanda fell sick. He collapsed, feverish, weak, burning up under the southern sun. The army had no time to wait. The war wasn't going to stop for one dying man. So they made a decision. They found a mountain cave, tucked in the rocks like a forgotten mouth, and gently laid Lugalbanda inside. They gave him water, left him some food, and just like that, they left. They marched on toward Aratta, and Lugalbanda was alone, left behind. But this wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning. The cave was dark and quiet, carved by time into the side of the mountain. The wind whistled outside like a distant voice. Inside, Lugalbanda lay still, his body weak, his lips dry. Every breath felt like it might be his last. But he didn't die. He waited. Days passed. The food his companions had left behind began to run out. His fever broke, slowly. The pain in his limbs eased, little by little. And eventually, the silence that once felt like a death sentence became something else entirely. A space to think, a space to feel, a space to pray. Lugalbanda began calling to the gods, to Utu, the sun god, to Inanna, the goddess of war and love. He didn't beg, he didn't demand, he simply spoke to them, honestly, as a man with nothing left to lose. And somehow, it worked. In the days that followed, strange strength returned to his body. He could stand again, he could walk, he could breathe deeply without pain. And there, in that mountain cave, something inside him shifted. He was no longer just a soldier. Something divine, something forgotten by time, had touched him, and he wasn't going to waste it. Lugalbanda stepped out of the cave, blinking into the sunlight. The mountains stretched before him like a dream, vast, silent, endless. The army of Uruk was long gone, already marching deep into the land of Aratta. He was alone, but not powerless. Every stone beneath his feet, every whisper of wind, it felt different now, as if the world itself was paying attention. His body moved with ease, like it remembered how to do things it had never done before. He didn't stumble, he didn't grow tired. It was as if the gods had filled his blood with something more than human. And so he began the journey to rejoin his comrades. Not at a crawl, not by hiding, but fast, faster than any man should move. In the legends, it's said that Lugalbanda ran with the speed of a mountain deer, crossing valleys and cliffs in a single day. He ran through the highlands, through thorn bushes and rocky paths, his legs never tiring, his chest never aching. He ate wild figs, drank from cold springs, and kept moving. The army, deep in enemy lands, had no idea he was coming. But they would know soon enough, because this wasn't the same Lugalbanda they had left behind. Something had changed, and the gods were watching. As Lugalbanda raced through the mountains, something caught his eye. High above, circling in the sky, was an enormous eagle. Not just any bird, but one that shimmered in the sunlight, with wings wider than a man's outstretched arms. This was Anzud, a sacred creature tied to the heavens, feared and honored in tales whispered around campfires. At first, Lugalbanda just watched it glide, but then he heard it. A cry, not from above, but from the rocks. He followed the sound, weaving through narrow paths until he found a nest wedged into the cliffs. And there it was, Anzud's chick, fallen from the nest, weak, calling out. The great eagle had been circling helplessly, unable to rescue its young. Lugalbanda looked at the steep walls, the fragile life before him, and acted. He fed the chick what little he had. He cleaned its wounds, stayed through the night, and protected it from wild animals. And in the early morning light, Anzud descended. It didn't attack. It didn't screech. Instead, it looked at Lugalbanda and bowed its head. In return for saving its child, Anzud offered something few mortals ever receive, a gift of speed and knowledge, a blessing from the sky itself. From that moment on, Lugalbanda didn't just move like a man reborn. He moved like someone touched by the divine, fast enough to outrun storms, sharp enough to read the winds, strong enough to change the course of battle. But he wasn't thinking of power. He just wanted to find his brothers, to return home, and to fulfill whatever fate had been set before him. With Anzud's blessing pulsing through him, Lugalbanda moved like no other man. He scaled cliffs in moments, crossed deserts in hours, and ran through valleys faster than horses could gallop. The sickness, the weakness, it was all behind him now. What remained was determination and a heart full of fire. His brothers had long given him up for dead. When they saw him suddenly appear at the camp near Arata, alive and vibrant, it was as if a spirit had returned from the underworld. Eyes widened, hands trembled. Whispers passed between soldiers like wind through tall grass. But Lugalbanda didn't seek praise. He only asked what needed to be done. And what needed to be done was impossible. Arata still stood defiant. Their walls were strong, their people proud. The king of Uruk, Enmerkar, was at a loss. No siege worked. No threat moved the enemy. Enmerkar, for all his wisdom and command, could not bring Arata to surrender. So Lugalbanda, unknown to most, stepped forward. He offered to go, alone, into enemy territory, to carry a message not of war, but of clever persuasion. He asked for no guards, no horses, no weapons, just his speed, his voice, and whatever courage had been planted in his heart during his long, painful days in the cave. The king allowed it, perhaps out of hope, perhaps out of desperation. And so, under the cover of dusk, Lugalbanda vanished once again, this time into the very heart of danger. Lugalbanda raced across the wild hills and deep valleys between Uruk and Arata, the wind always seeming to follow behind him. As he moved, he carried not just Enmerkar's message, but something deeper, a sense that fate itself was guiding him. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He had become something more, something touched by the gods. He slipped into Arata unseen, as silent as a shadow. The city stood proud, its gates high, its people wary. Lugalbanda didn't force his way in. He didn't need to. His presence, calm and certain, drew attention. Even the guards felt no threat. This man didn't come to conquer. He came to speak. He asked to meet Arata's king. A bold request, but something in Lugalbanda's eyes, something unshakable, convinced them to let him through. Soon, he stood face to face with the ruler of the enemy. And what did he offer? Not demands, not threats, but words crafted with care, soaked in reason and hope. He spoke of shared ancestry, of trade, of balance between two great cities. He spoke with the wisdom of a prophet and the clarity of a soldier who had seen war up close. His message was Enmerkar's, but his delivery was entirely his own. The king of Arata, surprised and curious, listened, and slowly, tensions began to bend. Not break, not shatter, but bend, just enough, under the weight of Lugalbanda's calm determination. With the king of Arata still weighing his decision, Lugalbanda did not linger. His mission wasn't to negotiate, but to deliver, to carry the words of Uruk with speed and clarity, then return. So once his task was done, he stepped away from the polished halls of Arata, once again moving through hills and wild lands like a creature born of the earth and wind. The journey back was swift, almost unreal. The days felt like hours. The burdens that had once nearly crushed him were gone. The strength the gods had given him still pulsed in his veins. The wild animals didn't threaten him. The elements didn't slow him. It was as if the world itself now cleared a path for him. When the towers of Uruk appeared on the horizon, his heart swelled, not with pride, but with peace. He had done it. Against all odds, he had delivered the message, not just with words, but with grace. The people of Uruk gathered as he returned. Enmerkar met him at the city's edge. And when the king heard all that Lugalbanda had seen and said, he didn't shout, didn't cheer. He simply nodded, the way a king does when he knows something bigger is at play. Lugalbanda had gone to death's door in the mountains and come back transformed. He was no longer just a servant of the king. He was something more. After his return, Lugalbanda did not seek reward. He didn't boast of divine dreams or tell tales of lions tamed or mountains crossed. He spoke of what was necessary. He said only what needed to be heard. That was enough. But those around him saw the change. The boy who had once fallen weak in the highlands now moved with the quiet strength of someone who had faced the unknown and understood it. He had touched something sacred, something ancient, and it lingered in his eyes. Word of his journey spread, first in whispers, then in songs. Not because Lugalbanda wanted it, but because stories like his can't be buried. They rise, passed from voice to voice, shaped by wonder and belief. People began calling him Lugalbanda the Wise, and in time, Lugalbanda the Hero. He returned to serve Enmerkar, not as a simple warrior, but as an advisor, a symbol, a steady hand in stormy times. And though battles would still come, and Arata would remain a rival, something had changed between the two cities. A bridge had been formed, not of stone or treaty, but of endurance, humility, and respect. And at the center of that change was the one who had once been left behind in a cave. Lugalbanda, not a conqueror, not a god, but a man who endured and quietly became a legend.